Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. Today I wanted to do a state of the game video for Epic 7. Before we get into it though, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, please see the video description below for a link to my Discord. So I've seen a lot of criticism on, I guess, in the community, whether it's, on Twitch or on Discord, about the current state of the game. And I think that there are some valid criticisms, and we'll go through those. My overall take right now of the situation is that I think there are definitely bad decisions that Smilegate has made, but despite those bad decisions, I think the meta is fun to play right now, and we'll get into that. First, just kind of like setting up my perspective on this issue, and I guess for full disclosure, I'm obviously a whale. I pull every unit, I have good gear, I probably have better than average gear for people in Legend just because I farm so much in this game. I've played a lot of RTA in the past. I started playing in Season 2, and I've, done for the most part, or I've played at high levels for the most part throughout that time. So I think I have a good perspective on, like what the competitive scene is like. And if I was to point out one valid criticism that has been made, it's that the units have been released way too quickly, right? It's very hard to keep up, even for a whale. So we can look at this website here. It's I think it's like CeciliaBot, has this really cool graphic of when units have been released. And everyone remembers the two collabs that happened, but if you look at this, you can really just see the density of everything that happened during this time period. So we got Rem and Violet, and that was, a big collab. It was a big deal at the time, or Rem and Violet. Wow, I've been drafting too much. Rem and Amelia. At the time, these were very meta-relevant units. It was a collab. They're limited heroes. People spent a lot of resources to pull them. So that's starting, towards the end of August, going into September. So then within a month, we got an ML5 that was, I guess, not super relevant at the time, and we did get another limited, though. And even though Caesarea was not super meta at this time, people still feel a bit compelled to pull limited. So, you have a collab, and then another limited essentially in the same month, because these came out at the end of August. And then within the same month, we then got a must-pull ML4, which was clearly overpowered out of the gate. And this was really problematic because ML4s don't have pity, so people spent a large amount of resources trying to get this unit. This is also after Smilegate had said, previously on multiple occasions that having ML4s with no pity was an issue and that they wanted to address it. So despite the fact that they said that, they then released this unit anyways, knowing full well that it was overpowered and that people were going to spend a lot to get it. That felt a little not good to me. So then, that was September, and then the next month we got a must-pull ML5, and we also got a very strong RGB5. Now, people may not have been super aware of Ran when he came out, but I think most people in the competitive RTA scene looked at him and said, that unit is nuts, and at least pull one copy just because nothing else in the game does what he does, and his base speed is so high, right? So this is within October, and then this is immediately followed up by another collab with two more limited heroes, and this is occurring right at the end of the RTA season, right? So, Rimuru became very popular in the last week, but, we had two more limited must-pulls. Following that, I guess ML Celine was a little bit of a miss in terms of, being a must-pull unit, right? She's, fine, but it's kind of hard to use her. And then we go and we hit, in early January, we get ML Ilias, who was, I guess we all know where that is. So, within really just a few months, we get two collabs, multiple other must-pull RGB5s, including a limited, an ML4, and a couple ML5s that were, must-pulls. That's a lot, right, in a short amount of time. To put that in context, let's look back at what was going on before this collab, right? So this was at the end of August, and if we scroll back, Strays was good, right, but he wasn't as oppressive for as long as these other things were. I felt like he was kind of a one, and he was really popular for a few weeks and then he kind of went away. But he is an ML5 and a lot of people did spend resources on him, so it's a valid point to point him out. And before that, there's kind of nothing going on in the RGB territory. Through all of July, we had this ML4 here, Kawazu, who was kind of a dud. Going back now into June, we had ML Kauric, who was bad on release, and most people did not pull him for that reason. Going back, still nothing in RGB territory. We have repeats, we have a dud ML5, so nothing. We're back multiple months now, with literally nothing worth pulling, right? Further back, we have an ML4 that's really for PvE, Now we're into March, and we have Ida, who was a dud at the time. She fits into some drafts well now, but that's months later, right? At the time, Ida was not anything special. And we have Delabette, who was pretty much a dud when she came out. Still nothing. Politis, so back all the way back to February. So we went from pretty much August all the way back to February before we got a relevant RGB5 that was worth pulling. Archdemon Shadow came out around this time and was not super relevant when she came out. Like, there were some people that used her well, but she obviously got buffed later and is stronger now, right? She was also available, I think, in the coin shop just from the get-go. Like, you didn't have to pull her from the summons. You could just buy her, right, at the time. So she was made more accessible to people than other ML5s have been. If we go back, Opsig was kind of relevant at the time, but you had to have super good gear for her. TML she was decent. And then LR Crow is probably the last example between that collab and October here of when a must-pull ML5 that like really shook the meta came out. I wouldn't say that TML and Opsig really shook the meta too much at the time. So this was like a huge content drought. So we go through all this time period with like nothing, and then it was just boom, 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 boom from August onwards. And I think fitting all that stuff in a short amount of time was probably, to a degree, poor planning. There was probably some stuff going on behind the scenes with these collabs that we're not aware of that might have screwed the timeline up a teeny bit. You know, you can't really hold that against Smilegate. It's good that they're going out and doing collabs, but you know, adding these limiteds and other powerful RGB5s and the ML5s on top of it, that's a lot for a free-to-play player to keep up with. And I could very much understand that people feel overwhelmed and just basically like they got power gapped, right, or power crept in this short amount of time by people who are able to pull the units. Okay, so I think another valid criticism of some of the units that have come out recently is that they have very high base speeds. So for example, like if we go to the hero journal here, and this thing's always a challenge, I guess I want gold knights. So we can look at Conqueror Lilius and look at her stats. Her base speed is 121, which is fast. And if we look at Ran, I think he has like the best base speed in the game. His base speed isn't like 129? Yeah, it's 129. So these units, because they're strong and because they're so fast, I think they naturally push the meta in a fast direction. And I think that that's probably bad for the game. I think it makes it harder to play standard and tank if, you know, players have access to units that can do so much so quickly. I think just, you know, in general, that's probably bad, and they should not have made their base speed so quick, given the kits that they have. I think that's fundamentally like why they're considered broken right now, and I think that's a valid point. But, you know, all of this kind of got me thinking, you know, what would the meta be like if it was ideal? Like, what, you know, if we could change everything and make, you know, the game into a perfect state, what would that look like? And I think one thing would be a large variety of units, right? Including units you can pick early. All playstyles would be viable at a high level, like cleave, aggro, standard, and tank. And I think that's true right now. You know, I think speed has a bit of an advantage, more than it should, but I think you definitely can still play standard and tank drafts, like lots of people do it. Another thing is that I think meta shifts should happen on a regular basis or a more frequent basis, but they should be a little smaller, and you want that to prevent the game from getting stale. And then the last thing is minimal RNG. And I think this is going to be my main point as to why I don't think the game is in that bad of a place right now. If you look at previous metas, I think we can all remember when this thing came out. Carrot was completely oppressive at the time. She was obnoxious because really one of the only answers to her was cleave. And as a standard player, if you wanted to play standard, this was like you had to play Carrot, or like pre-ban Carrot or something. It just wasn't good. So the reason why this was bad was because it limited your options so much, and it really like made the games repetitive. Another bad thing about it was that her kit was by nature RNG, and that like she relied on debuffs to do damage, and so you would take her some games and just get 15%ed and just lose. Like I saw a lot of people, you know, have that happen to them, and it was like a real feels bad at the time. Carrot was weak to cleave, and so I think cleavers like that meta because it gave them, you know, a pretty easy option of dealing with her. We're kind of in a similar situation right now with Emma Lilius, actually, because she's so good and oppressive. One of her only answers is cleave, and so if you can do that, you're probably doing okay. But I think the Carrot meta was just strictly worse than the meta we have now, because With Carrot, it was just Cleaver Carrot. Like, there were no other options. Now at least we have a few other options. We have ML Cowrick, he's really strong. We have Rimuru, he's really strong. We have Apocalypse Ravi, she's really strong. So there's at least like some amount of variety to be seen. I think the Carrot meta was way more stale. Like, there were fewer units being used at the time because of that. Just my opinion, though. I think that another, I guess, meta that is worth discussing is after Bellion came out. And I think this was... it's tough to say which was worse, the immediate post-Bellion meta or the Carrot meta. I think they were both really bad. And they were really bad, or the Bellion meta was really bad because she increased the amount of RNG in the game substantially, and she completely invalidated a style of play. So it's pretty impressive that one unit was able to do both of those things. So she increased RNG incredibly because at the time she was released, they buffed Violet, and then we also had Rem released, right? So those were two very RNG units, and at the time, one of their only answers was Spectre Tenebria, and Bellion hard countered Spectre Tenebria. So as a result of that, those units saw even more use than they normally would have. So lots of games had Rem and Violet, so there's lots of RNG in the game. Bellion is also an RNG unit, either with Elbrus or her counter stuff, right? Very punishing. I think that some RNG is okay for the game. You want a little bit so that you can get interesting game states, and so the game isn't stale, right? It's a little unpredictable, which can be exciting. However, you don't want RNG to be at the point where it completely swings games one direction or another, right? You don't want to be in a state where you've outdrafted the opponent and they just pick Violet and then they win. And that happens like more than once in a blue moon. It happens actually somewhat frequently. It's kind of sad. And immediately post-Bellion, like, that was kind of the meta everyone was in, and it was horrendous. So I think if we compare the meta now to those two metas, I think I can objectively say it's better. It's obviously not perfect. It could be better. But we have less RNG in general. Like, Lilius is powerful, but she's not super RNG like Rem and Violet and Bellion are. We have a slight increase in variety compared to, the Carrot meta. There are multiple powerful units you can pick early, and there's lots of good DPS heroes you have options to pick into later. So I think, those are points in favor of the meta right now compared to previous ones. Alright, so this video is getting kind of long and rambly. I apologize for that. Let's quickly talk about solutions. So what can be done to improve the game going forward? So one thing I think is that we need more frequent buffs and nerfs, but smaller changes than what we get right now. The buffs that we get right now is on a 2-month cycle, I think, which feels really long. And they're really big and impactful when they happen, but in between it can get a little stale. I think if you increase the frequency of these, but decreased, their impact, I think it would keep the game feeling fresh, and it wouldn't be, like these huge power swings like when ML Cowrick comes out of nowhere. I think also, like, we have to have nerfs. It doesn't need to be like a huge, hammer that just deletes a unit from being relevant, but I think slight tweaks are really important for the game and just need to happen. If you can't nerf units, the only way to fix a situation is to release a new unit, right? And then we talked about that problem earlier. It's not good. A solution I've heard some people talk about is rotating global bans, where, like, to play RTA, like, Lilius is banned this week or something like that. I think this is not good. I think it would be pretty painful for free-to-play players if, like, one of the few units you have mullet and built up is banned that week. That would feel bad to me. And this is coming from somebody that basically has all the units built, but that's just my perspective. I think another solution is that we need to even out unit release. This seems kind of like a no-brainer. This is obviously tough to do because I think collabs can have a lot of, like, internal politics, right, between the two companies to work out. But we shouldn't go through, like, that big gap I showed before August where nothing was happening for months, right? And then we got this huge dump of, like, all this stuff. It was way too uneven. I think it needs to be better. And then the last thing is that we need to reduce RNG. And there's a few easy solutions for that. I think we can just totally delete Violet from the game. I'm only partially kidding. But I think he does need a nerf a little bit. And but just in general, decreasing RNG. I think it's just too much right now with some of these units. Luckily, the meta is not as focused on these guys as it used to be, but they're still around, and it's still pretty toxic when it happens. I'm sure we all have, like, Rem or Violet stories of them just soloing us for kind of no reason. I think Rimuru is actually an example of a hero that, while powerful, he has like no RNG in his kit. If anything, he has like negative RNG, right? Because his skill 3 has elemental neutrality, so he's not getting punished by elemental like the miss chance or whatever. And he steals buffs, which, I mean, I guess I can get 15%ed, but you know, his fixed damage is just fixed. It's what it is. So he's obviously a very powerful unit, but he doesn't have the same RNG impact that like Violet has and stuff. I think Rimmer was actually really good for the game when he came out because he kind of countered Rem and Violet, and like we needed to push those things out. So just to sum up really quickly, the solutions, I think, more frequent buffs, and we need to have nerfs. No to global bans, I think that'd be a bad idea. We need to even out unit release, reduce RNG. I think if we slightly nerf the base speed on Amalilius, then I think that the game would be in a pretty good spot. I guess also Ran as well. I think his base speed needs to be nerfed a tad. So I think that'll wrap it up. Sorry this was long and rambly, but that's just what I think of the state of the game right now. Talk to you later.